Hi, it's Jen from Shabby Fabrics. The day we've been waiting for has arrived. It's the beginning of our Noel Sampler Sew Along, and I am so glad that we are doing this together. And thank you so much for your patience. You know we've had a little bit of a delay in getting started, only because we've had some delays in getting all the fabrics needed to make these absolutely amazing kits. Look how much fabric is in here. It's beautifully packaged. Some of the fabric is folded into each other, so make sure you take all of the things out. Make sure you have everything that you need. By the way, if your kit hasn't arrived yet, of course, we have people joining us from all around the world. Shipping times, as we've said in the past, and especially during COVID, are delayed because of just the heavy amount of cargo, and not that many airliners are flying. I know as a professional pilot, I have a lot of cargo on my airplane, and right now not as many airliners are flying, so as a result cargo is a little bit delayed. So if your kit hasn't arrived yet, no worries. These videos are recorded and available for you to watch at a time of your convenience. And just so you know, because these are very involved videos, these will be long. Give yourself just the chance to pace this and watch this at a time and chunks of period that are convenient for you. Don't feel like you have to watch the whole thing through all at once. We know that's a lot of time, but I don't want to skip any steps. We want you to be able to build the exact same quilt that's hanging behind me so that you'll have that to display in your own home or maybe even give it as a gift. Let me start off with some bullet points, and then we're going to jump right into the project. Just some things I want to bring up to you. First off was at this time, our sew along kits are sold out. So if you're just stumbling along this video and you're like, I want to make that, we are actively working with BERNINA to print more fabric for us, and we're hoping that we'll have more kits available in December of 2020. And if not, if they're pushing into January of 2021, hey, that's great. You'll be ready for Christmas of 2021, and if next year went even a fraction as fast as this year, that'll be here in no time. So just know if you did miss out on the kit, no worries, we're working on getting more for you, and you'll always be able to watch the video. So just keep that in the bank. If you are interested in a kit, you can always email us at BOM, that's B as in boy, O as in orange, M as in Mike, BOM, at shabbyfabrics.com. We'll put you on a wait list and let you know when kits become available. By the way, we fell so much in love with this collection from Nancy Halverson that we went ahead and did the Ornament Club. So hey, maybe if you're waiting to get this kit, it'd be fun to jump into that ornament kit, or if you already have this kit, to have that total look in your home of a coordinating project, having this on the wall and the coordinating Christmas ornaments on the tree would be amazing. And as we've said before with the Ornament Club, everything, and I do mean everything, is pre-cut for you. Applique is pre-fused laser cut, and all the adorable buttons are also included. Super fun project there as well. So if you're looking for that coordinated look, that's one for you to think about as well. We talked about these are longer videos. You're getting tired watching me. I get that. No problem. Come back later. Give yourself the latitude to kind of watch this whenever you want to. We're here for you, by the way. Facebook groups are a great source for you. We have a Facebook group. It's free for you to join. Jump into the fun. There'll be lots of people there. You can post your questions. We as a staff will try to answer those as readily as we can. But hey, if you're watching and you already know the answer to that person's question, we love communities. We'd love to have you jump in there, jump into the conversation, or if you have something you'd love to add, maybe a tip or technique you love, we get to learn from you too. We'd love to have you post that. So please, please join the conversation. We would love to hear from you. Let's see, what else can we talk about? The cutting sequence. One thing we like to do at Shabby Fabrics is to cut as little of the fabric as we have to, because we always want to save it for maybe another coordinating project to do something else all different, right? So if I have to cut a 2.5-inch strip out of a fabric, and I have to cut a 3-inch strip out of a fabric, I always like to cut the 3-inch strip first, get my squares out of that, or rectangles, and then from that strip, what's left over, I cut those narrower strips. So I just wanted to mention that when you're getting ready to cut out your fabric, and of course you see that I've already got that cut and labeled on the table just to save us some time. These videos are already very long, so I wanted to get that part done ahead of time. Be sure, by the way, add sizing to that to your fabric. You'll be so happy that you do. It stabilizes it, it reduces the amount of stretching, and it just seems like it makes it a little bit easier to get accurate piecing. So I definitely wanted to mention that. And again, you know, if the pattern says cut a 2.5 inch block and then cut a 3-inch block, and by the way, she calls strips blocks in this pattern. I just wanted to mention that as well. I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but I'm trying to cover a lot of territory before we dive deep into this block. So I'm used to strips of fabric that I cut being called strips. Nancy Halverson in her pattern, almost throughout the pattern, calls them blocks. So I just wanted to mention that to you as well when you do open up your pattern. That she'll say right away for the end block, for example, cut one 8.5 by 12 inch block from the red holly swirl fabric. So I just wanted to clarify she uses the word block as maybe you and I might use as a strip. And of course we're going to be using those things to build a block. So I wanted to mention that right there as well. I better keep my spot so I don't lose that. So we're going to try to economize our cuts so we can have maybe some fabric left over in case we make any mistakes, or just left over to use for a future project, maybe a scrappy quilt, which is always a lot of fun. I want to talk about how she says blocks instead of strips throughout there. Cutting your fabrics, you know, do you want to cut them block by block? Do you want to cut the whole thing at once? Let me just say this, there's a lot of pieces in this. There's so much in this. If you do cut your fabrics all at the same time, go ahead and cut your fabrics, but make sure you're building your end block and putting it on a design board. Now this is just a piece of, you could easily make this. You can go to like Michael's Arts and Crafts and you buy that kind of thicker, kind of like a cardboard, but it's white. You could cover that with a piece of flannel, tape it to the back. You could even bind it with the edge if you want. These are fantastic. They're also very clingy because this kind of has a grippy feel to it. To lay all your pieces out, if you cut everything at once, I highly encourage you, go ahead and label that. That's my end block and it's over there. That's my O block and it's over there. You get the idea to stay organized and you don't start mixing up your pieces because obviously they're all in common across all 4 of the blocks. Focus of each video is going to be fussy cutting the panel. That's going to be huge. I was amazed how time consuming that was, and I will go over all of those pointers because you want those things to hit exactly where they are. This is where the 8.5 inch ruler is going to totally shine. By the way, if you didn't pick up the ruler set, we still have some available. If you only bought one ruler in this whole set, it's your 8.5 inch ruler. You will see trying to square up these panels, trying to cut these panels without that would be not impossible, but uncomfortable at best and much more difficult. So if the budget calls for one ruler, pick the 8.5. If it's possible for you to get the ruler suite, by all means, go ahead and do that. I think I grabbed 2 of those, 2 of these. Let me put one of those aside. So we've got our 8.5 by 24.5 inch ruler. A great utility ruler is our 6.5 by 12.5. We're going to use our corner clipper. I'll show you how to do that. We have a seam guide, which is really nice when we're going to be sewing on either side of a line. Instead of sewing on the either side of a line 1/4 inch, we'll be able to draw the line and sew on the line. We'll get to that, and we'll be squaring up a lot of blocks to 2.5, and that's what we'll be using our 2.5 by 6.5 inch ruler. You know that we gave you a gift to thank you again for your patience and the delay of getting this started. You've got a cute little I Love My Quilting Friends ruler. Now this is also 2.5 inches wide, but this is only 6 inches long. I liked using this one for quilting purposes. It's a full 6.5, and there's just a lot more lines, so I'll definitely be using this one. Go ahead and put this one in your stash. It's great to have, and it's just a nice reminder about loving our quilting friends, and of course you have your Shabby pen. All right, we are definitely going to be focusing each video on fussy cutting and accurate piecing. 1/4 inch seam allowance is king here. that became very apparent to me. I did some seam ripping. I did actually a lot of seam ripping when I was preparing the panels for you for video. So I will go ahead as we do each video and show you, okay, we're going to make this section together. We're going to do a focus on how do I create this. So those are the types of things that I've done before video rolled, so you can get that target of here's where we're going and how are we going to get there. So that'll be what we'll be focusing on. 1/4 inch seam allowance. Here's what I also found. Sewing a scant quarter, which is just a breadth less than 1/4 inch. Oh, that was so helpful. So if you tend to sew on the heavier side, a little bit more than 1/4, you have to rein that in. I am the #1 offender of sewing bigger than 1/4 inch seam allowance. I don't know why I do it. It is my miss, and I had to rein that in to make all of these pieces work. So definitely focus on the 1/4 inch seam allowance, and if you can stand it, go and be on that scant side. It will serve you throughout this entire quilt. I was working with Tammy on this project, and boy, when she was like, get to that scant quarter, it was super helpful. So thank you, Tammy, for helping me with that. That was really helpful, and I am trying to make that my new normal, right, is my scant. All right, what else? Sizing, we talked about that. I'll tell you what I did though. True confession, when I was creating this, I was like coating this whole thing with so much sizing, it was almost dripping. And when I ironed it with a hot iron, I found myself, I shrank my panel. Good news was though, when I started pulling the fabric and started stretching it, I was able to grow it back. Of course, if I got the fabric wet with sizing and water, I can kind of, you know, push and pull the fabric. You're gonna see what we're talking about shortly. Sizing is good. Don't give it a bath in that, which is what my habit was. So a light sizing for especially on your panel fabric. Talked about the importance of 1/4 inch seam allowance. That 8.5 inch ruler is going to be our new favorite ruler. The pattern, let's talk about the pattern. What you're going to get in your pattern is actually 3 things. Of course, you'll have your cover, you'll have your large diagram and instructions, 2 sizes. I want you to note how marked up my paper is. Why? Because I needed those reminders. Don't be afraid to mark on your pattern. Write yourself notes. As I say things to you, go ahead and write them down if you feel they're relevant for you to include that. Use a pencil or pen as you prefer. I wrote mine in pen so that I could see it. You might want to write that in pencil so you can erase if you choose to. But this is yours, of course. It's yours to do what you want. So you get the big page as well as the smaller one. This smaller one will come into play in our L block in the very end as we finish the L block and move into the finishing. Don't lose this. You'll need that. It's a small piece of paper. It'll be easy to lose that. Lastly, inside there is a piece of paper that Art to Heart, who wrote this pattern, says the fabric requirements listed of what you need. This is on the back of the pattern. The fabric requirement list of what you need to make the quilt includes a 10-inch square of the teal multi-dot fabric. This fabric is not used in the quilt. So where we're going with that is if you look on the back of your pattern and you're like, I don't see a 10-inch square of a teal multi-dot fabric. That's correct because it doesn't occur in the quilt, but it inadvertently was added to the back of their pattern. So Art to Heart, we requested, and they were very kind to go ahead and put that paper inside your pattern. So you're not looking for a fabric that is not in your kit and you do not need. So that's included. Now we have gone ahead and done a little bit of the next level like we love to do because we are quilters here. We know the questions you have because we have the same questions. We found ourselves referring to the color image more than the black and white diagram because I got to see where things are going. As a result, what we will include, what we have included in your kit, is a larger image of those blocks broken out. This is going to be your constant reference, your constant, where does that go? Oh, I see it goes here. What's that fabric? Oh, I see that's here. It's going to really help you and save you time. So keep that handy all throughout. I'm just going to put that right there. I will constantly be referring to that. You can be sure of that. Lastly, some of the fabrics inside this project are directional. We have things like this fabric right here. You can imagine there's only one way for that to go, because if it was going any other direction, it would look kind of silly, wouldn't it? Well, what we've done is gone ahead and created a cutting diagram so that you know how to orient your fabric so that they come out so that true north is true north and your stripes are going the right way, and so on and so forth. So what that basically means, and I'll turn that to the overhead camera, might be a little bit easier for you to see that, and I'll move our kit out of the way. Boy, that is a big kit right there. And free shipping to the United States. Isn't that fantastic? I love that. Okay, so let's talk about this cutting diagram. When you see this fabric right here, what we're telling you is when you open up your kit and you put your 10-inch square here, make sure that you're cutting, your stripes are going this way, and you're cutting your end block this way. If you follow your fabric cutting diagram, and we've only created a cutting diagram for directional fabrics. So if you have a fabric like the gray holly swirl, it doesn't matter how you orient this. It's not a directional fabric. That is why in the fabric cutting diagram, we only include it for directional fabrics where you could potentially be cutting it in the wrong direction and end up with your houses going sideways or upside down or something that's not desirable. So just make sure when you're using your cutting diagram, fabrics are oriented as you see here, and cut those blocks out and label them right away, okay? Go ahead and do that, because as you can see, look here, some of these blocks are, you're cutting multiple pieces for multiple blocks. You do want to label those as soon as you cut them. Last note is here on the left side, it says important. This is to clarify the L block, and I know I'm jumping way ahead, but we're going to do that right now. Go ahead, get your pattern. I really would like to encourage you to do this step right now. Throughout her pattern, she historically has said, let's just jump here to up here, cut two 4.5 by 4.5 inch blocks. Cut two 1.5 by 1.5 inch blocks. She gives you both measurements. Here, under the L block, this is where I want to encourage you to, as it says, this is to clarify the L block cutting instructions for the white holly shadow fabric. We recommend writing these cuts directly into your pattern. Right here, it says, cut two 1.5 by width of fabric strips, subcut to one 12.5 inch block, one 10-inch block. We just want to clarify that is a 1.5 by 12.5 inch strip, okay? Not a 12.5 inch square. You will have enough white holly fabric left over, but it's supposed to be for your borders and your finishing kit. So I wanted to make sure that no one is inadvertently reading that as, I'm going to cut a 12.5 inch block, I'm going to cut two or one 10-inch block, etc., etc. Go ahead and write those in right there. That's by 1.5 by 1.5. So, all right, you got that. That's part of our job here, is it's trying to intercept possible areas of confusion where things could go wrong. And as you can imagine, if you start making those cuts, you will not have enough fabric to complete your borders. And at this time, we do not have more of that fabric because we're trying to get more printed as we speak. So that is for you. We put a lot of thought into that, and I'm grateful for our staff to produce that. But those are for you to help get things accurate and ready to go so you can be successful and have a good time putting our project together. I already said that. Don't be afraid to write notes into your pattern. We talked about the L block, the cutting diagrams created. We're going to refer to our photo constantly. And now we're getting ready to go. We want those three things that I just do this all the time. A fresh rotary blade in my cutter. I get a fresh 80-12 needle in the sewing machine, and I make sure I've got fresh 50 weight cotton thread. I've already done those things. We're ready to go. Let's dive in. So I'm going to get myself organized here. There's a lot going on this table. I have my work cut out for me, as they say. I want to start right away with these panels. I found them challenging. I'm going to get my iron heating up to full hot. So let's just go right into our pattern. 1/4" seam allowances, of course. HST, half square triangles, of course, right sides together, RST, all the standard stuff you're used to. By the way, if you are like I was in the very beginning as a quilter, I was ambitious. I wanted to do the hardest quilt I could see. I was like, I can do this, and I fell flat on my face. None of my points came together. I didn't know what I was doing, but yeah, I had cut all this amazing and valuable fabric, and I didn't realize then that you can't just always walk back into a quilt shop and rebuy that fabric a year later. You sometimes can't get it a week later. So if you are that ambitious beginner, I really want to encourage you to make sure that you've practiced on some scrap fabric before you dive into the project. So once you cut these things, you know, you're committed, you're there. And if you're not quite there, go ahead and put this kit aside. It's not going anywhere. Our videos will be on YouTube for you to watch. I just want to encourage you, make sure you're ready. This is for definitely, I would say, an average, I would say, not a beginner level, not necessarily advanced, but right in that intermediate level. So if you don't think you're quite there yet, make sure that you are, and maybe you want to follow along in the video and you can make that determination for yourself. All right, step 1, cutting and sewing the end block. That's what we'll be doing. We're going to cut 1 Santa block from the He's Making a List panel, and we're going to cut that 8.5 by 15.5. You're already having that aha moment of like, now I see why she wanted us to use the 8.5-inch ruler, because straight away we are going to be needing to use that. So let's get out our Santa, and the amount of sizing, I don't think we've actually added sizing to this. We may have added a touch, but when I talk about sizing, and I better move that, I don't want to spray that document, I'm going to need that. We're just this. You know, I was spraying it so heavily that, yeah, it was pretty wet. Don't be afraid to steam. What you don't want is to cut your stocking out and it's got wrinkles and then you're ironing later. That's how you're going to distort something out of shape. I want to point something out with regard to cutting out your stocking panels. Most of them are cut to the same dimension, but there's one, and it's on this cut. I believe it's on this cut. I think we're going to cut 2 panels on this one. Let's look at that. We're going to cut this panel and this panel here. And I'm going to show you the pointers of where are we looking, how are we lining this up. The first thing I did is I have it going this way, okay? So notice on the table, move this out of the way, and let's get back to our pattern. You'll see why I'm orienting it this way. So I'm going to cut this 8.5 by 15.5, center the block in the width measurement, and start the length measurement 1/4 inch above the green cream tree section. So this might help you if I have this out. And again, it's always, let me just move this like this. So you're seeing, kind of just seeing this portion. That might be helpful for you. Now don't let me go cut my pen. You see where I had to sew this on, this part right here? So you can see how important that is, that that line is straight. That's king, right? And we also want to have a nice, when we sew this in, that we're not clipping these points. So when you are getting ready to cut these stocking panels, you're looking at multiple places, and it changes on the panel you're cutting. Here, you don't want to clip those points. That's king. And you also don't want to clip these points. So that's what takes a little bit of time to cut the panel just so. So they said that our reference was, again, a 1/4 inch above the green tree section. So that makes sense. We would want it to be a 1/4 inch above here. So when we sew that red strip in here, it comes nicely to those points. All right, here's the great thing. While I am going to cut this 15.5, I'm just going to cut it all the way down. This is all going to be waste anyway. There's no reason to measure it exactly 15.5 long yet. We will get to that. What is king, of course, is 8.5, but here's the beautiful part. My ruler is 8.5. So let's start off with, I'm just going to choose a line like this, and I'm going to begin. Let's line that up where that major line is just running across there. I know that I will be a quarter above it, but right now I just want to get square with my panel. So as you can see on the Creative Grid ruler, the dashed line is where I will end up when this is sewn into my block. So even though out here I'm getting some cream, I know that ultimately if I cut this panel right now and sew this into my quilt, I'm going to have this plus a touch of that teal. Okay? So that the orientation is the same. Look, you see that right there? That little slice that came in, just a touch of that. So there, it doesn't look right, does it? I want you to see what this looks like. And you're like, that just looks weird. Don't be afraid to push your panel around a little bit. Do you remember how we said we want to be, look at my points over here. I have here. So my line is running right on the top of those peaks. And that 1/4 inch line is running right alongside those points as well, which I also want to protect. So as I look at this, I'm thinking, all right, well, if I cut it here, while this point looks good and this point looks good and this point looks good, and I'm tempted to grab my rotary cutter, as I look over and examine the rest of this, look what's going to happen right now. I'm going to inadvertently cut off Santa's mitten. Well, you got to have Santa's mitten, or how else is he going to deliver these gifts, right? You got to have that. So that's not going to work. Don't be afraid to push around and stretch out that panel so that it works. You could stretch it this way. You can stretch panels this way. Don't be afraid to move that panel to get what you need to get here. So let's try again. I'm going to also use, well, let's look at our site picture here. Looks like that was, just the tip of that was cut off. Here it looks like the way that I cut my panel. I guess I'm very particular about Santa's hand. I did not want anything cutting off here. But you can see on this quilt here that just a tip of that. No two quilts are going to be alike. Do you realize that? You're going to cut your panel differently than I cut my panel, than somebody else. And that's kind of fun. I love that. So whatever you feel, when you feel you're there, I'm going to line back up with my points. Watch how I can pull this. Within reason, with my nails, I've got 1/4 inch. I've got to line these points up here. This must be, and I want to hit that. I don't like how that's diverged. Watch, you see that right there? How I'm pulling this over? Just a touch. Yes, you can do that. And now I'm riding along here. You know what? I think I'm going to have to live with Santa's mitten on this one, or I try to just pull it. See that? How I can start to fudge that just a little bit. Once I feel like I'm ready, I want to pull that over just a touch as well. Let's go. Let's go ahead and cut that. Now it's a little bit tricky. When you are home, and of course I think you're home, you want to get it in a place where you can make a cut and you can move. I can't really get around this table. I'm very tempted to cut here, and then I would walk around this table. and cut back here. Because rather than move this ruler, I really don't want to move this ruler, but I'm going to do that just so that if you're in a space you can't walk around, you see how I'm going to deal with this. Go ahead and cut all the way like that. Might as well just cut that off like that. All right, so let's make sure everything is where we want it to be. Did we make our cuts exactly where we want them? I think I went a little shallow. Let me cut that real quick. All right. Now, very carefully, and I do mean very carefully, let's go ahead. Like, don't even touch it. Don't even look at it, right? We will just go back up and cut our 8.5 inch strip. All right, now we'll move this out of the way, and now we can get more particular about that measurement. Remember how it said a 1/4 inch above? This is where the smaller ruler is really helpful. You're not having to deal with the big ruler. This is why I put this one in your, this is such a useful ruler, right? Anytime you're cutting, a 1/4 inch above those points, use that line that has the black dash line. That'll be where we will be dead on that line right there and go ahead and cut. This is where we will begin to measure down our 15.5 inches. Let me just confirm that. Like I said, there's one block. Yes, it's the next one. It's the truck that's 16.5 inches long. All of the other panels, all of the other bigger panels, not the ones that's the puppy and the kitten that come later, are 15.5 inches long, so just be careful. Just be careful when you get ready to do the next one, which is the truck, it's 16.5 inches long. That would definitely ruin your day if you cut that to 15.5. All right, so what are we gonna do here? Let's turn to the side. Oh, I think I had that right. See my 15.5? All I have to do, and I'm gonna turn that actually a little bit sideways. Limited space is challenging on the set here with me, is 15 inches. I'm lining up everything, trying to get my head out of the way, but I'm also trying to be over top of my fabric so I don't make a miscut. $15.5, and then let's give that a cut. Now you could put this in your scrap stash, and what a fun thing that would be if you want to ever fussy cut a bird. You already have one, so keep that. I love that those can be repurposed for more projects later on. All right, that is our first panel. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about your pointers, about the truck panel, and I'm going to put this aside over there. Let's look at that truck panel. I think it's actually on the other panel. Yes, it is. So let's get that one out. I just want to show you where the pointers would be on that one. I think we added sizing to that one. So let me put this one aside over here. And when we get ready to start doing that block, we'll bring that out. This is one, this section of our quilt. Isn't this adorable? This is the other part. So you're going to be able to see your target, right? You can see which part we're keeping. I wanted to bring those out so, you know, if you're inclined to kind of stop and even take a screenshot and see what my panel looks like, that might be helpful for you when you're cutting your panel out. So I'll just leave that there if you want to take a glance at that. But let's keep going. I want to focus on what's our target. So on this particular one, I might just give it a fresh press. By the way, cutting the panels, I found to be one of the most time-consuming parts of the project because it has to be so precise. And you're checking so many points, and of course, once you cut it, you can't go back. So I definitely found myself checking and checking just because again. And again, I will lay that out away from me, just like I did before, and I'll flip that around for you. So you're kind of seeing what that looks like so you can try to approximate that same location. Okay. This is saying from the truck block, again, 8.5 wide, but this time 16.5 inches long. We pointed that out already. Center the block in the width measurement and start the length measurement 1/4 inch above the teal stripe. So 1/4 inch above the teal stripe, I think, is going to put me right actually at the top of that navy. I'm pretty sure that I remember that. Yes. Still, she's very specific. 1/4 inch above, it happens to be at the top of that navy blue. Okay, so same story. Let's get our big ruler back out. Let's see, where did we put that big ruler? Over here. Always the challenge of space. So remember we said this is king. You can imagine if this is in any way crooked at the top, it would be very notable. So we're going to be king with this here and these points here. Let's start there and see what that will do for us. I'll bring a big line exactly onto that navy, and now I'm looking at the sides and I can already see where the ruler is right now? That 1/4 inch is saying if I cut that, I'm going to clip all of those points. That's not good. That's not even kind of good. So we got to scoot that over. Let's see what we did here. We were able to get outside of that. Now this is very interesting to me, that this panel, it's very interesting. I think this had more sizing than this did, but you can see where these 1/4 inch are hitting is going to be just the tips of those. You know, if you're going to have to clip the tips of something, try to do it the same on both sides so that it's not perfect on one side but really in on another. That's where you're trying to average it in and make it be balanced. So I'm checking here and here, and I know that if where my 1/4 inch is, I'll stay on the navy blue, and I'll stay on the navy blue, and I won't get any of this cream. Even though we'll see a touch of it, it'll be sewn into the seam allowance. I'm running parallel. Let's go ahead and cut that fabric. I think I better find a rotary cutter to do that. Oh, I do want to run parallel to this though. I'm going to try to make an adjustment. You see what I was looking at? As this was coming in, see this right here? I want that to run parallel if possible. So if you need to pull out just a touch, go ahead and do it. Fussy cutting these panels takes time. Okay, I think we're going to go. Let's go. we're done with those for this block. All right, so we ready to go? Did that happen? All right, now we know that they specifically told us a 1/4 inch above the green stripe. So I'm going to again use my dashed line and make sure I'm very tempted to do that blue line, but I'm not. I'm going to run that 1/4 inch. In my reference point, I'm looking here above the stripe. I'll make that cut. And then this was that one that was the 16.5 inches long. Just turn that to the side. And I love on the Creative Grid ruler, the black dots are the measurements that have the 1/2 inch, 9.5, 16.5. The white dots are solid measurements. It's incredible technology, and that's so smart, right? It's just I love being able to just go to a 1/2 inch increment and not have to find it really between my 16 and 17, for example. I can just go and find that. All right, 16.5, measure twice, cut once, and there we are. All right, our panels are done. I am excited. Let's put that big ruler down for now. We don't need that. And let's put that aside for the moment as well. All right, what is next in our pattern? Let's start bringing this to the front. It's going to be a little while before we start adding anything to our panel, so let's get this front and center. Let's get our, we've already got all of our fabrics cut out, of course. I'm going to put that aside for now. And we're going to dive right back into our pattern. We'll start off with the gift bow block, and that is, let me show you that part of that. That would be helpful for you to see that. Hopefully me doing the video prep of you seeing that section is helpful to you. It's always, I always like to know, where am I going and how do I get there? That's just how I think. I always like to know that. Let me put those aside and just reduce the clutter of what you're seeing on the table so I can try to stay organized for you to see that. This is what we're going to be making. So that's our visual target. All right, I'll leave that there. So step number 1 is we're going to draw a diagonal line on the wrong side of the R block. That is our green sweater fabric. And you can imagine that, you know, trying to just get things labeled really helps you. If you didn't do that, you don't want to take that step, it's okay. You'll just want to make sure you absolutely know which one is my green sweater fabric. You might need to go back up and reference that. And that is from the green sweater fabrics. This is cut to 2 7/8 inch. And we'll be using the X1, which is our blue multi-dot. And I'm just going to use one of those right now. And they're going to draw a line and sew on either side of that. Now, you've got a choice. You've always got a choice with things like this. You can, I'm going to show you both ways. You can decide the way you love. I always want to show you options. That's what a sew along is for, is to just sew along and share ideas, and that's always really fun. In fact, I'll tell you what, when I've been at quilt retreats, it's when I've learned the most stuff, because people are working on different projects with different notions I've maybe never seen before. And I'm like, ooh, how does that work? What does that do? And I learned so much. Okay, so you can draw the line, place this right side together, and sew on either side of the line. That's how we all learned. If you're like, I would rather sew on a line, what that means is instead of doing that, we would go ahead and use, this is why I put this in your ruler set, corner to corner. This is a Creative Grid tool. If you prefer to sew on a line instead of next to a line or a 1/4 inch away from a line, grab for this tool. And now, what's nice about that is it's kind of stress-free. You don't have to concentrate. I think I need a fresh pen here. This one's starting to, you've seen me on video, I use these all the time. And of course we have refills for that as well. Now I can just sew on the line, okay? Now, jumping ahead, because I know this is coming and because I want to economize time, we're going to do the same thing with a U and an X. Same thing. So let's just do it all at the same time. Save ourselves some time. We'll repeat that. What am I doing? I'm doing it the old-fashioned way. Let's use the tools that we have here to make our life a lot easier. I'll draw that. I'm sewing on a BERNINA today. And I've got, sometimes I get questions like, what's your presser foot? And by the way, this is called a dual feed, okay? This is a really cool feature. I've been asked so many times, is that a walking foot? It's not. I know it looks like it. One of the cool things about BERNINA and their presser feet that end with the letter D is you get to engage the dual feed. It's basically dual feed dogs that just feed this thing in so beautifully. So if you have a local quilt shop, I encourage you, go check it out. We love our local quilt shops. We need our local quilt shops. Go learn how to sew or just sew on a BERNINA and you'll see how wonderful it is. And you may decide that someday you just got to have one of those in your sewing room if you don't already have one, okay? So I'm sewing with a 57D today. It's got my little fence on it and I've just got my standard stitch length of a 2.5. It's just the default for BERNINA. So whatever that feels like for you. And what we're going to do is just sew on the line. Okay, and we all know with half square triangles, once you've done that step, we're going to have a little pile of sticker here today, aren't we? You'll go ahead with your rotary cutter and we're just going to cut corner to corner. Pressing directions. Let's talk about pressing directions. You know, pressing directions, I think pressing is sometimes a personal preference. Sometimes I go with what's in the pattern. Sometimes I don't go with the pattern. Keep in mind, I am giving you my framework of how I put this thing together. You're going to do what you're going to do and what you're comfortable with. So these are always just suggestions. Do what you want to do. Sometimes I do go with her pressing instructions and sometimes I go in a different direction. So just know that is really your discretion. In this particular case, when they don't have a preference, they sometimes don't mention it. Now, if you look down here though, she specifically does have arrows of how she wants you to press those. So if you're inclined to follow her instructions on that, in this particular case, with this unit that is the XR, she's recommending that we go ahead and press toward the green sweater fabric. So I will go ahead and do that because I jumped down and I noticed those pressing arrows. Of course, that's always letting us know which direction they recommend. There are a couple of places in here where I did press differently than what was indicated in the pattern, and I'll try to point those out as if it happens, or when it happens, I should say, so that you can decide what you want to do with your quilts. And maybe I'll try to remember to mention why I pressed that differently if I do remember to bring that up. Okay, lots going on. You can imagine teaching something like this. It's very complicated. It's not even that complicated. I shouldn't say that. It's specific. It's not complicated. It's specific. And each point, of course, matters. Cutting your fabrics to the right size matters. All of these things add up. All right. This one, which is now pressing toward our X, which is the navy dot. Okay, so for these, let's press that. Notice I pre-warm my seams. Here's what I've learned about that. I didn't used to do that in the past. I would just go. But what I've learned from just, again, quilt retreats, watching people, it seems like when I warm up the fabric and the seam, it's more likely to move in the direction that I want it to be in. So I don't know if you do that with yours. If you don't, maybe you want to give it a try. I'm reformed. I never used to do it, and obviously I put together a lot of quilts, but I really, really enjoy that. Now I want to encourage you to go ahead and square these up. Now, in a perfect world, you shouldn't need to, but quilting isn't a perfect world, and I'm not a perfect quilter. So I find myself doing a lot of squaring up and certainly a lot of seam ripping as I try to achieve perfection in quilting, but often don't quite hit that mark. So we'll use our 2.5 by 6.5 inch ruler, which is lovely because we know that that already is. Now, if you've got a spinning mat, wonderful. I don't have one on camera with me because I already am very crowded. It's just a bigger block and a bigger layout. But if you have one, gosh, that'd be fantastic to use. Even a bigger 3.5 by a 6.5, they have those diagonal lines that help align anything that's going to help you square this up to 2.5. But I definitely want to go into that with squared up blocks. So I'm just going to square those up real quick. We can speed up our camera while we do that. Okay, so those are squared up to 2.5. Our next instruction is arrange the gift bow block pieces into 4 rows of 4 blocks each. See figure 2, that's down here. We have a live sample. I love that. You could certainly be referring to your photo. It just helps because you can imagine, you're like, what's W? What's Q? What is that? Now, if you've got your fabrics labeled, that's great, but you can always mislabel them. I want to encourage you. Go ahead and keep referring to that photo. We've got the block here. It's going to make it even a little bit simpler for us. So what we'll do is we're going to lay that out right on our wool pressing mat. That's going to be able to prominently just be displayed, and you'll be able to see it. Let's grab all of these fabrics here. And we will just build that same sight picture, those in the 4 corners. So let's check ourselves here. How did we do? Let's look. Yes, we are ready to go. So how fun is that? Boom, just like that. We have a block laid out. I'll put that aside. Now this is, of course, we've already said this is not a beginner project. If you are an experienced beginner, you're running into that intermediate level, you know what you're doing. You've been here before, you know what you're doing. So we would just be right sides together, sewing a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I personally recommend pressing all these seams open. This is one of the areas where I do think that possibly one thing you might consider is pressing your seams open. Indicated in the pattern is top row and 3rd row are pressed to the right, and 2nd and 4th row are pressed to the left. So again, I just want to let you know that's one area that you might consider pressing, per the pattern or this way. I just feel like there's going to be a lot of bulk going on, and in order for the block to lay as flat as possible, I'm going to press those seams open. Sometimes when you want to press your seams open, you might want to reduce your stitch length just a touch to add more stitches. But that's, again, your discretion. So right side together, right sides together. I just kind of stack everything up, just like this. They're all just ready to go, right sides together. So I'm going to go sew. Now let me point this one out. You see this right here? I don't want to, this is a great opportunity. I can either sew on this side or I can flip it and sew on this side. What should I do? Well, I want to point out that it's actually a very easy choice, because on this side, as I come down, my presser foot is going to want to roll that seam. Now I've got tools, you know, I've got that, like that purple thing that can try to keep that down, or I can simply flip that over. That seam is already going along my path. It's not going to roll on me because it's going in the direction that I'm traveling. So there's certain times where you might want to consider flipping a pair over. Just make sure if you do flip, you don't rotate and get something out of orientation. And I'm going to go here. All right, I'm going to go sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance on all of those and press all of the seams open. And then I'm going to relay things back out. And then we'll be sewing those rows together. So there's 4 strips, 4 and 4. And then sewing all of those together, pressing seams open again to be able to make our block. To save time, we will fast forward and try to move through that so we can move on to the other parts of the block, so the video isn't becoming too long for us. So I'm back and I laid everything out. True confession. Before I went off, well, not off camera, but kind of sped things up, I told you that I'm planning to press these seams open. As I was doing that, I realized this is a lot of points for me to get. You know, now making this quilt again, you learn things when you make something the second time, don't you? That's a lot of points to get, and if I can have interlocking seams, that's a really nice thing. So I am going to re-endorse the directions in the pattern that does say to press that top row left, to the right. Better put my glasses on here. The top and the 3rd row to the right, and the 2nd and the 4th to the left. And that is what I've done. I've pressed in that direction. Now, as you would expect, we will go right sides together. With that, I think I'm going to go ahead and I'll go ahead and just sew that one like that. So let me stack those together. Right sides together. Right sides together. Same thing. I'm going to go sew those into rows, pressing in according to the directions inside the pattern. And then I want to talk to you about pinning these points. That is key. So I will not skip over that step. Let me go sew this together. You know, the debate of pressing seams to the side or open, it continues. There are definitely benefits to pressing open. You get to see your point so that when you come in to sew rows together, it's very easy to hit it. It doesn't interlock, however, so I get why that debate is ongoing. And this comes down to personal preference. You know, as long as you have a quilt hanging on the wall that you're proud of, that you made, that's what matters, and that you had fun doing it. So don't stress out and take the fun out of quilting. So don't overthink that. Sometimes I find myself guilty of literally pondering seam allowances. And sometimes I think I can take the fun out of it thinking too hard. And in the end, just sew. Have a good time. That's why we're doing what we're doing today. Getting the privilege of getting to sew together, right? Okay, almost done. So I want to show you what I'm talking about, actually. Let me show you what I'm talking about. seam allowance pressed open. See this right here? With my seam allowance pressed open, do you see how I can see my 1/4 inch point? That's why some people always press their seams open whenever they're given a choice, because when you come along and sew this, you have this visual place to hit that 1/4 inch. So that's why there's a debate about it, and I wanted to show you why. So if you're like, nope, why would anyone ever do that? That's why they do it. That's why you might want to consider that. All right, options, options, options. Which options should we take? So let's lay this back out. And I'm trying to make sure I get this oriented properly. I always lay back. I've sewn far too many blocks that I care to admit to in the wrong arrangement by not laying things back out. So we can imagine, let's look at this one. The goal is to hit the points. We already know that about quilting. We want to hit as many points as possible. That's our goal. So when we have interlocking seams, like we do right now, it helps. It helps to get that, because I can feel that click in. And I'm going to put a pin in every single one of those places. So I'm going to sew, once I have this all pinned nicely with interlocking seams and a pin in every single location, now it's essential you sew an accurate 1/4 inch seam allowance, because you don't have that target. That seam is not pressed open for you to see. It's off to the side. That's per the instructions here. But now you got to nail that 1/4 inch seam allowance so that we have all of those hitting exactly where we want those to hit. Okay. Same with this one. I'm going to pin it. We're going to go sew both of them together. Once I sew these together, I'm definitely pressing the seams open at that point. Otherwise, it's just too much bulk moving in one direction or the other. So hey, we would love to have you join the conversation. Do you press some seams open, or do you always press to the side? I would actually love to know that. I'd love to know what the consensus is. By the way, and I know I'm a little deep into this video at this point, I recommend you do not pre-wash these fabrics. You don't want to shrink these panels. You don't want to get to the point where you don't have a good cut to make because it had too much shrinkage. So we get that question now and again, should I pre-wash? No, please don't do that. Okay, let's see how we did here. Let's warm that up. And I want to check, how are my points? Did they come off? Did I clip anything? I'm happy with what I'm seeing. Now I want to distribute that bulk. Unless that wants to obviously go in another direction, I'm just going to open that seam up. You can see that this block, if I had pressed all the seams open, would lie flatter. Absolutely would. So again, back to that debate of preference and what are you going to do. But still, if I get in there and give a good press, and don't be afraid to do just a little touch of steam, don't get crazy, I still have a nice flat block, and pressing that on a wool pressing mat is huge. I just have noticed that when I press anything on a wool pressing mat, whether it's wool or cotton, my seams lie flatter. I don't know why. I don't know if it's the give. Maybe that's it. But my blocks press out flatter. Let's check this out. I'm happy with what I'm seeing here. Let's go ahead and again press the seams open. And now you know what's coming up next. The two hemispheres, the two halves, will be sewn together, pinned at those points, just like you saw me do before, and with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, pressing the seams open. Now keep in mind, we've only done one leg of our N, right? We're only doing this section. We have this to go and this to go. We have to move along. So what I will do is go ahead and sew those rows together. I'll quickly do that. Well, no, I better carefully do that. I've already said I don't want to seam rip, right? That is my goal. Of course, that's always my goal, but especially in this project. All right, let's make sure we orient this properly so we don't start off with seam ripping that. Right sides together, I'm going to pin that, I'm going to sew that, and when I come back, I'm going to actually sew those two strips together. That's the very bottom of this block. I'm going to sew those together, press your direction, press toward the gray, and I'm just going to sew that onto the bottom of this block, and we're going to sew the red strip to the top of that block. Actually, with that one, I want to talk to you about that. When I come back, let's do that part together. But when I do return, this will be put together, pressed open. These will be sewn together first and then attached to the bottom of that block. I'll be right back. So I have my block with my gray strip and my white. By the way, when I grabbed the white strip off camera to sew that on, I was reminded, and I'm going to say it right now, this fabric, it is very difficult to tell what's the right side and the wrong side. I find when I hold it to the light, it's got that kind of holly print on it. It's almost like a Baroque, kind of that, got like almost a texture to it. Just make sure you're checking every single time. The last thing that you'd want is potentially to sew that on upside down, and in the right light, you would notice that on the finished quilt. Another idea, if you'd cut a bunch of fabric out, is to just stack it where everything is right side up on your design board, so, or your workspace, or whatever you're doing. So when you grab that fabric, it's right side up, but still check it every single time. All right, you heard me say it. I made a big deal about it. And you know what? If you sew it wrong and you didn't cut it, you can always seam rip it. So far, I'm at 0 seam rips. I'm excited about that. I'm meeting my goal. Even off camera, I will be honest with you. I'll be square with you. And we can keep a tally of how many seam rips I have to do. So far, I'm at 0. All right. I said I wanted to say something to you about adding the red holly strip to the top of this. Now, normally, my training in quilting, let me find my glasses here, misplaced those. My training has always been small strip on top, go sew. Well, you know what I want to happen on here? I have a perfect guide. Look at that, 1/4 inch, that line. If I sew exactly on that line, I'm good. And that's why in this case, I'm going to, of course, line everything up beautifully, put in a pin or two, but I'm going to sew from this side. I have no seams underneath here that are going to roll on me. So I have every reason at this point to go ahead and have this side up, so I have a nice beautiful line to sew along, and the top of my stocking will be as perfect as it could get. Now in this instance, my inclination is just to go ahead and press. I'd press up. What does the instructions say? Let's look. I'm gonna peek over here and see if they even mention this to us. I don't think that part, I jumped ahead of myself just a touch, didn't I? I don't think they mentioned that, which way the pressing would be. You know, I always consider, is something going to be coming in alongside it where I need interlocking seams? I don't see that. So here, I think either if you pressed up or down, I don't think it really matters. So that would really be your preference. I'm just going to press up. Why not? If we need to change it later, we change it later. That's the great thing. If you haven't sewn pieces together where they're locking in and crisscrossing, if I press the wrong direction here and I need to press the other direction, just switch it. All right, that is sewn together. Now, we simply, here, I'm given this choice. Do I want to have this on top where it's nice and smooth and it's nice? You don't want that. because these seams underneath here can roll on you. I want to go ahead. I want to know where those are. So I want a visual on this. This piece is easy. This piece is not so easy. Lots of seams, lots going on. I don't doubt that this is 8.5. I had a ruler to help me get there. This being 8.5, maybe not always on the mark. I'm going to pin those corners first because I know, see if I just lay this down there, see how it's short? Nope, we're not going to do that. We're going to make that fit our panel. And then I just give it just a little bit. I find that center point and I pin there. And I'm going to pin here. Pin, pin, pin. I have rarely, okay, maybe never, regretted pinning. I have only regretted not pinning. So that's some words of wisdom from Jen. All right. Did we do that right? Do we have that right? I want to just double check it before I sew that. Yes. All right, here we go. 1/4 inch seam allowance. I am going to get that purple thing. See that seam wants to roll on me? Right there. Let's see, how are we doing? Now this is a no-brainer of how to press, right? Where does this seam want to go? I don't even have, it's an obvious answer. I just open this up and it's going, take me to the path of least resistance. That is the law of nature. That's just how it wants to be. And we're going to say, that's a great idea. We're going to go with that idea. So I'm going to warm up that seam real quick. And I'm going to comply with what the fabric already wants to do. I would have to have a very compelling reason to press that back onto itself. Let's have our block lie as flat, or block strip, I guess I would say, as flat as possible. And then I'll go back and press from the side. Now, so far, let's look and see how we've done. We've done a really nice job of capturing our points all the way around with good pinning, good pressing, all good skills. All right, our first part is done. Let's move on to the center part. Again, if you need to watch the video in sections and just go do the section, give yourself the permission to do that and then come back later. These are longer videos because I don't want you to have any questions. I want you to be able to have just a good time, relax. Let me do the work for you of explaining this so that you can just go have fun. All right, let's put this aside for now. We will be putting that together a little bit later on. So now we're working on this middle portion, but I want to show you what all is included in it. So this is just this big open section here. So we know we're going to be working with these two pieces and these two pieces. And there's some things that we can speed up here. So I'm just going to go ahead and sew these right side together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Let's see what I did for the pressing. It looks like I just pressed one direction and the other direction, and that center seam, when I sewed those together later on, which I will get to, I went ahead and pressed that open. So I'm going to press this together. I'm going to press this together. And on this one here, all that's happening once you press this together, here and here, is I'm sewing that on the bottom of that. When I come back, that's done. This part will be sewn together. I want to show you how to deal with these two. That's a little bit of a different thing, and we'll get to start using a corner clipper. And I want to show you how to do that, how to think about the corner clipper, if you're going to use it, and if not, I'll give you the option as well. I'll be right back. So I've got the two strips sewn together. This is the section we're going to look at. I've kind of folded this back and got myself a little more organized. Hopefully that'll help you get the same sight picture. We have this, and we have this section. This one we'll just put aside for the moment, for now. Let's talk about these corners right here. You've got a choice. We can do it the way we always learned how to do a corner, kind of a, what's my right side? I think that's my right side, yes. Where your right side together, draw the line, sew on the line, and flip. Absolutely can do that. In fact, I'll just draw that, so if you're like, I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't done that. Let me demonstrate that. Again, this, you're going to be marking on the wrong side. Corner to corner. I've got my friction pen, which we know erases with heat. You always want to look at what's the angle. You can get your diagram out. You're like, okay, where am I? I'm here. If you're not sure, fold the fabric back onto itself until you're like, nope, that's not that. That's that. You want to make sure that you're sure. Then, once you're sure, just let that go down, and now you know that's the line that you will be sewing on. You would simply pin that, sew on that line, and go ahead, make sure you're happy with that, and then trim that away. I'm going to show you how to use the corner clipper. The corner clipper, I love it. I love the accuracy of it. I love it speeds things up. Again, we recommend, sometimes using the corner clipper can be confusing. You're like, I don't know which side, how to turn this thing, which side to cut on. Same situation. We know this is the line we want to cut. I always like to use a corner clipper when it's oriented to me, to north. So I'm going to turn my shape, because this is the line now. Notice that drawn line. You wouldn't do this. This is instead of drawing the line, but I'm going to leave that there for you as a simple point of reference, that if you're unsure, I'm going to take that away actually. If you're like, well, yeah, I can see from the picture that it's going to be over here. Just draw a line. Just draw a line. Something that tells you you're going to go this way, not this way. So now, when I lay my corner clipper down, I want to have everything stacked. This square needs to be exactly on top of this. I'm going to be cutting through all of the layers. That line, the black line, is corner to corner, and I've got all these wonderful other sides. Look at that, that I can square up just like that. Now, the part you cut is always to your right. Now what I'm going to do, I'm definitely going to sew from this side. Let's go sew point to point. Put that in your stash. Do some fun little projects, to little miniature quilts. Maybe you can make some pocket prayers. All kinds of fun things to do. Look how that just creates the perfect corner. More than I could do on my own. Look at that. That is fantastic. Okay, so we've done this part. Let's look at the bottom portion of it. So again, we know, we can turn this way, it's that part over there. Grab a square. Again, make sure we know which side is right side. That's my right side. I am going to put that down, and I'm just going to draw a quick line. If I'm unsure, my line has got to go this way. So if I lay this down, I know that when I cut this, that part is away. If you're ever, by the way, if you're ever unsure of how to use the corner clipper on a particular cut, don't use it. Go old school. Do that. I'd rather have you go and do it right in a way that you're comfortable with. It's in the back of your mind. You've done it so many times. Then like, I can't figure this out on this particular block. Skip it. Just go old school on that. Do a mix and match. Do whatever you want to do to be comfortable. All right, but I am comfortable that when I cut that away, that now I will sew and flip to that side. So let's go ahead and make that next cut. Again, more fun pocket prayer stuff we can do with that. I'll put a pin in and let's repeat that. Okay. See those marks I made? Gone. I love that. Finger press to the outside. You know, this is bias now. Anytime we have that angle, it's bias. So be gentle with your fabric. You don't have to completely baby it, but that is, looking at this, now this section. So now remember how I said, I'm not sure how to press on this one. Maybe I didn't say that. Let's look. This now may matter. It does. Look at this. Do you see how those are going to come together right there? This is one of those moments where, change of plans, I do not want both of those seams headed downward. What's the seam that I now have the option to change? Can I change this seam? Yeah, but that doesn't feel natural to me. There's just more going on here. What does seem natural to me, of course, I pressed away from these two because there's two pieces here and the bulk is up on the upper portion, so I pressed away from the pressure, right? Not now. I'm going to press that back onto itself. Okay, now the benefit of that is now when I sew these two together, I have a wonderful interlocking seam, and that's what we want. That's what we want to see. So we will go ahead and pin. Here and here. And so our standard 1/4 inch seam, of course, we know we're doing a standard 1/4 the whole time. Let's look at something. How is this going to come out? It's funny, I want to point this out to you. I want to show this to you. See how that doesn't look right? To me, that doesn't look right. It's because one is coming across. Ankles mess me up. Is anybody else out there with me? If I make a mistake in quilting, it's more times on an angle than just like straight across. I get a little messed up. I think that's going to work out, but you know what? We're going to give it a whirl here. That doesn't look right to me, but I believe that it is because when that 1/4 inch is taken away, those two are going to meet. So while that looks weird and it looks like you should line up here, don't do it. Line up, this seam and this seam need to be a 1/4 inch away from each other. All right, let's go sew that. Okay, so we know what we're looking for. Did that point come out? The one that I'm like, does that look right? There are times in quilting with triangles and angles, I'm like, how is this going to actually work? And somehow it does. So let's just check here before we get too excited and see. I'm happy with that. That worked. Offsetting those two seams by that 1/4 inch, pinning here, worked beautifully. All right, I believe I pressed that seam open. That made sense to me. Yep, I did on that one. It's amazing how we only did that just a couple days ago, the video prep, and already I'm like, how did I do that? We live busy lives, don't we? I think we all do. Okay, so let's press that open. Now, the bottom portion of that's really straightforward. We know that we're just going to go ahead and sew that larger portion to the bottom. Hey, that's the true test, is does it fit? Where's my right side? That's my right side. Oh, nicely. Okay, I'm just going to sew that on. And I'll tell you what we'll do to consolidate steps. There's so much going on with each one of these blocks. Each one of them is its own little project, as you can see. Pin that, and I'll set that aside, because that's just simply sewing a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And at that point, I just press down. That's an obvious thing to do with that. What about this whole third section here that we've got coming up of this one? Let's get that panel back out. Actually, this one's kind of nice. It's a little bit of a breather, right? We've done piecing and piecing. This one, we will simply sew the stripe to the bottom, the houses to the top, and remember, on this one, sew from this side. Don't sew on this side. Up. No. I want you to go ahead and flip that over, and you're sewing right along that top line. That's king. We want that to be perfect. Go ahead and sew that together. We're going to sew the bottom together, and you're going to flip, and you're going to flip, and those are going to be on there. And you've got one more piece of that white, and that's going to be up in that corner here. Remember how we're going to do that. We know that we want that line here, just like that. You can either go old school, the way we all learned, and just sew on the lines, sew and flip and trim away, or if you're going to go ahead and use the corner clipper, if I can even find that thing right now, amongst all the fabric. What do we say? The part that's to the right gets trimmed away. We know when we lay this on here and stack it all nice and beautiful, and we lay this on here, the part that's to the right is the part we want gone, just like it's showing here. We'll give a cut, and we'll sew, and we'll flip. All right, because these videos are long. We're not even done. We have more to do. I'm going to do that off camera, and then you're simply sewing those 3 sections together. That's it. Don't think there's anything, there is actually. Now that I look at that, tell you what we're going to do. Let me get this last row put together completely. I'm going to sew this one for the second row. Sew this for the third row, including that corner, and then let's come back together. I don't want to jump too far ahead. I'm trying to save time, but I don't want to create confusion. So I'll go ahead and do those steps, and when we come back, we're going to have those 3 sections, and then we're going to figure out where to go from there. So we now have our 3 sections. Are you excited? I mean, I'm excited. I've already done this, and I'm still excited to do this. Again, it's so much fun. I love it. What a privilege. 3 sections. Now I'm definitely going to be referring to the pattern here. So let's look, how are we going to be doing this? Looks like we will go ahead sewing these 2 sections together. That's my step here in figure 8. We're going to sew those together, and they're recommending that we press the seam this direction. Then with the O strip, that's this one here, once these are sewn together, We'll sew this on the bottom of that. Sew that and flip. Make sure you got the, obviously the right and wrong side. We're dealing with a lot of white fabric now, so maybe make sure you got the right side up. Once that's done, let's see, we'll be here. Now we'll sew this unit to that. That's what's shown in figure 9. Figure 10 is showing our end piece. Will be at the very top, right side together. And I would recommend that this side with all the seams is up. It's up. You want to see those seams. You don't want them rolling because they're on the bottom side. And this being on the bottom, that's going to go on there. And then finally, our piece strip coming along our right side. This is a big block. My gosh, it's taking up more than my whole table. So I will get started. Let's again just repeat these two right side together. They recommended pressing the seam this direction. This will go on. These come together. This and then that. All right, I'm going to get started right now. Lots of pinning, good pressing, and make sure you got that white side, the correct side is up. All right, let's go put this together. Okay, I have sewn together the end block. Here it is. It's big. Isn't it something? It's amazing. I did have to resist my natural instincts. Let me show you the back real quick. It was not natural to press this direction. That was indicated in the pattern. Of course, I wanted to press away from all of that. But where these things come together in the corners and these blocks are sewn in matters. We definitely want interlocking seams. So I tried to follow those pressing instructions and be pressing toward those so that when we get ready to sew the panels together, they'll all lock in beautifully. So much fun. I hope you, thank you for hanging in there. Let me thank you first. I know these are longer videos. Tutorials always are because we don't want to skip any steps. Of course, our customer service reps, they aren't necessarily in this particular program. They don't know how these blocks are going together. So my job is to hopefully show you exactly what to do. You don't have any questions, you can just jump into the fun and be able to build your N. Of course, we'll be getting ready for O. Again, if you want to go ahead and get that cut out, labeled, and put on a design board the way I had that today, that really worked out super handy. I could kind of move it around my space so nicely. So thank you so much. I'm looking forward to seeing you next week when we build the O block together. I'll see you then.